Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Wednesday, the 12th of September 2018. And the title of this morning's broadcast is Quadrilla, a world-class bankruptcy? Question mark. And this broadcast I wanted to do really a week or so ago, but I held back. But following the article that appeared in the Times a couple of days ago, I think it's extremely pertinent that I should raise some of these issues. Now, it's very, very clear that when the Department of Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy granted Quadrilla permission to proceed with the frack at Preston New Road, there were some concerns about its financial status. And of course, like all these companies, their finances are not exactly crystal clear. And, Quadrilla has no revenue per se, no income other than that of its partners and, shareholders, if you like. So Greg Clark requested that before they proceed, Spirit Energy, which is the joint venture between Centrica and Bayern Gas, a Norwegian company, that they deposit £557,000 into an escrow account. In other words, to lay aside so that in the event of anything going seriously wrong, which of course it will, then there was a fund to draw upon. Now, £57,000, dollars, I believe it was, is just not enough. I mean, this is clearly inadequate. I mean, it's not enough, certainly not enough to cap the well, to sort of restore the land to its former agricultural glory. But nonetheless, somebody in their infinite wisdom came up with that number, and that's the requirement. They wouldn't have done that if obviously there were no concerns about the financial resilience of Quadrilla. So on Monday, the Times reported that Quadrilla had burned through the 60 million that Centrica had sort of bunged them. And in fact, Quadrilla were bragging last year that earlier this year, that, for the first time it had made a profit. Well, it had only made a profit because it had received a bung from Centrica. But it seems that they are now out of cash. And in fact, this may well be partly why Francis Egan, who's the chief executive officer of Quadrilla, refused to let the BBC film on the pad, because maybe some of the financial shortcomings would have been a little bit too obvious. So, could this be the reason why some 7 weeks after Greg Clark had signed off on the frack at Preston New Road, there's been no sign of any fracking infrastructure, i.e. the frack spread, the pumps, coming on to the pad? Now, maybe there's something even more serious occurring here. And word reaches me, now this is uncorroborated, but coming from a source that should know what they're talking about, word reaches me that Quadrilla have some very, very serious concerns that they have lost the integrity of the liner beneath the pad. Now, this is extremely serious, because the liner is laid during the pad construction, and then the surface material is laid on top of that liner. And the purpose of the liner is to seal the pad from the surrounding area, so that in the event of a spill or worse, then any rogue fluids will simply seep down through the surface material, get captured by the liner, and then will be run off into tanks which are completely self-contained and prevent any contamination in the surrounding area. Now, if the liner has been damaged, this is a bit like losing integrity of roofing felt. You know, if you've got a leak in your roof with the tiles, and you know, there's also a leak in the roofing felt, then you know, it can be argued that actually that might help you spot the hole in the felt, but it doesn't help you spot the hole in the tiles. And it can be a major problem to try and find where the leak is coming from. And really, that's the case with a liner. In fact, the only way to really resolve the problem is to dig the whole pad up and replace the liner. And CUADRILLA certainly do not have the cash for that. So at this juncture, the Environment Agency should be all over this. And in fact, you know, whether freedom of information requests can work fast enough, but people should be contacting the Environment Agency and asking the Environment Agency to investigate whether there is any truth in this rumor, which comes, say, from a source that should know what they're talking about, that there's a problem, you know, with the liner. Because if that is the case, there should be an absolute block on CUADRILLA progressing with the intended frack. Now, knowing the way this industry thinks, the likelihood is that they will try and hush this up and run the frack and just hope to goodness that basically there is no significant contamination. But, you know, world class, an industry and a government that keeps bragging about world-class regulation, and yet, in the event of things going wrong, they tend to turn a blind eye. So, like I said, you know, can't actually corroborate that there's any substantive truth in this rumor, but if I wasn't confident about the source, then I wouldn't mention it. But I think that CUADRILLA have a real problem. So have Centrica, or Spirit Energy, the joint venture between Centrica and Bayerngas, have they perhaps finally had a Barclays moment and realized that they are investing in an absolute dog? You know, when Third Energy finally published their accounts, which were due at the end of September 2017, finally published in the end of January 2018, it transpired that Third Energy had a debt ratio of 100 times its annual revenue. Now, CUADRILLA has no annual revenue. Obviously, it just has mounting debt. But Barclays realized that basically they were simply just throwing more money into a literal and metaphorical black hole. Well, have Centrica perhaps realized the same? Now, John Dewar, the former chief executive of Third Energy, fell on his sword last November, and I think you know, he fell on his sword rather than have to face the consequences of justifying a set of accounts where their debt ratio was 100 to 1 over revenue. Fanny Egan is unlikely to fall on his sword. You know, he waxes the Blarney, as he did, you know, in the BBC Country File article, which was, I think, broadcast late last week. So, you know, it doesn't really matter where you look at this industry. You know, Max Kaiser last week broadcast one of his episodes of the Kaiser Report, where he made the observation that the US fracking industry is $200 billion in debt. And this is now a real problem for the US economy, because the industry has drilled wells that it doesn't have the funds to actually bring online. It doesn't have the funds to complete. It doesn't have the funds to frack. There's issues in terms of pipeline capacity. There's issues in terms of storage capacity. And yet somehow the market is being sustained, and West Texas crude is still trading at just under $70. But this is really, you know, a false economy here, because the bottom line is that the industry is dying on its feet. The rig count is going down, and some of the shale plays are literally, basically drying out. They've been bled dry, literally in the space of barely 2 decades. So anyone who thinks that hydrocarbons are sustainable beyond the next 30, 40 years is dreaming. We are in the twilight years of a hydrocarbon driven economy. Now, I say that twilight years probably means 30 to 50 years or so, but nonetheless, we're on that trajectory. And I think it's just 7, 8 years ago that renewables were providing barely a tenth of the energy in the UK, but now it's about a third. So there's always going to be a demand for gas, well, for the foreseeable future. But the reality is that the world is awash with gas, natural gas, gas from conventional resources that doesn't have to be extracted via aggressive fracking. Now, as we see in northern Holland, in the area around Groningen, even the abstraction of conventional gas can still cause massive geological issues. And in that area, there's now a mass movement to try and stop the production there because of the magnitude of the seismic events and the phenomenal property damage that has occurred in that area. And I'll put a link under today's broadcast to the problems that are manifesting in Groningen. So even conventional gas is not without its problems, but nonetheless, those problems are relatively small compared to the magnitude of the problems associated with unconventional gas exploitation. So the emphasis really now is on the Environment Agency to demonstrate that we have a world-class Environment Agency that is genuinely interested in protecting the environment rather than just acting as a front to convince the British public that they're there to do that job when in fact they're just there to provide this facade to protect the corporations. So I think CUADRILLA are in a world of hurt, and the onus now is on Greg Clark to do the right thing and call a halt to all further operations at Prestonby Road pending a thorough investigation as to whether the liner has been damaged. And of course, this is believed to be what occurred actually at the iGas well site at Barton Moss, which would be nearly 4.5 years ago, when it was reported that there were some very strange substances leaching into the groundwater surrounding the site. And iGas actually refused to let anyone onto the site for some 6 months or so to conduct an independent investigation, obviously in the hope that the Manchester rainfall would wash whatever contaminants that had leached onto the pad, would wash them out and flush them away, and they wouldn't be traceable. And the ultimate court decision was, well, we can't actually prove that it was iGas, and there's a possibility that these contaminants were there before iGas rocked up on the site. This kind of agility amongst the establishment to come up with an explanation for their failings is really quite remarkable. So meanwhile, in the south of England, the camp that was established literally a couple of weeks or so ago at Horse Hill was evicted under common law. Now, this is an interesting move, because if the unconventional gas industry is resorting to common law, then maybe that's an indication that we need to be doing the same, because of course common law does provide for the protection of the environment, for the protection of resources for future generations. And this of course is being pushed all to one side in seeking profit. Well, David Lenegas, who of course got run off from the board of UCOG some 3.5 years ago now due to his blagging, those who monitor and manage the alternative investment market decided that David Lenegas was a serial blagger. And this is exactly what he does. in the industry of the AIM, the alternative investment market, he's known as a fluffer. You bring in the likes of David Lenegas, who then blags that this time next year you'll be millionaires if you invest in this dog stock. Well, he'd done this sort of once too often, and the alternative investment market decided that he wasn't good for business, and so they effectively forced UCOG to kick him off the board. But he still obviously maintains an interest, and he appeared on social media making the most outrageous threats against the protectors there, and I believe that some of his tweets have actually been forwarded to the authorities for them to investigate further. So any business that David Lenegas is associated with should be an indicator that you should walk away. But of course he preys on the small investors, with the Del Boy mantra of this time next year you'll be millionaires. All you got to do is throw your life savings at me, and then he can walk away with his commission, and these often retirees are left wondering how the hell they ever fell for such an outright blag. So what are we going to look at here? Well, I think that the mounting pressure, the mounting scrutiny from the public on this industry is going to force the Tory party to recognise sooner rather than later that the smart thing to do is going to pull the plug on this sorry industry once and for all. And of course, when that happens, then we have to really ramp up the awareness campaign on the dangers associated with 5G telecoms, the microwave frequencies that emanate from the military technology, untried, untested on civilians, and unfortunately where it has been rolled out, then the effects on the community have been very significant. And the reality is that if 5G is rolled out, then communities will feel the negative impact probably a lot quicker than they will if fracking actually got ahead, because the fracking process, it might take 2 to 3 years for the symptoms to manifest. With 5G, it's going to be a lot quicker. So stay vigilant and keep the pressure on. CUADRILLA are very much on the back foot, but remember that politicians don't like scrutiny. They don't like the public getting involved. They want your vote, and then they want you to frack off and carry on with your daily lives and not bother them with trivia like concerns about the contamination in their area or the impact on their property prices. So ultimately, it is up to each and every one of us to participate in this process and get this industry shut down once and for all. And today, of course, at I believe it's 11 o'clock, Lee Rowley, the MP for North East Derbyshire, will be hosting a debate, a parliamentary debate in Westminster. I believe it's actually in Westminster Central Hall, but it'll be interesting to see, one, who turns up, and two, of course, the outcome of the debate on permitted development, which is the Tory party's push to allow the motherfrackers to literally rock up anywhere where they have acquired access to the land without going through any kind of due process, without seeking any local authority input. So you can see what's coming. And if we do nothing, then unfortunately, of course, the prognosis is clear to see. So doing nothing isn't an option. So no episodes of Fracking Nightmare or Humanity vs. Insanity tomorrow, as for the next couple of days I am full on trying to support the communities that are challenging the latest affront to parliamentary democracy, i.e. the IGAS injunction. But hopefully I will be back on Friday morning. If I'm not, then that means I'm still chasing to get some documentation finalised to challenge the iGas injunction. So if I'm not back on Friday, I will undoubtedly be back next Monday, the 17th of September. Meanwhile, you have a great day, and get on the phones, get onto your computer, and send those emails or those tweets to Greg Clark and the Environment Agency and ask them what they are doing about a company that has run out of cash before it's even got the frac spread on site. So if anything goes seriously wrong, just who is going to pick up the tab? You have a great day, and I'll see you whenever. Take care now.